So here I have my weld. It's dried out. This is stuff that I grew here in the garden in St. Louis. And I have a thermometer so I can know how hot I get it. And I have a little hot plate here. And whenever I'm working with the hot plate, because this thing's not the greatest, I also have a fire extinguisher. So I'll go ahead and get started here. I'm going to add water to this. Always use distilled water. This is not distilled water. This is just sink water. Do as I say, not as I do. Again, this is just for a test. Next year I'll be making a lot more. This is just to see how the process works, to experiment, so that next year when I make larger amounts, I'll have the process down a little better. All right, so I'm going to turn this up. So I don't want this to boil. I want this to get to about 170 degrees. And once it gets there, I will let it sit for about half hour to an hour, and then it'll be ready to use. This has been heated up for about an hour. It's not boiling. It's starting to simmer a little bit, but I'm keeping the temperature below 100 Celsius, 100 degrees Celsius. Oops, fogged up my camera. So that it's not quite boiling. So this is done. It's been going for an hour. We should be good to go. So I'm going to take this out. Yeah, so that was below boiling, about 175 degrees Fahrenheit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour this into this coffee. It's an old coffee maker that doesn't work anymore. But that way I can filter out all that stuff. So I'll just set this here. Ooh, it's hot. So I've essentially boiled out. The dye should be in this water now. It doesn't look yellow. It looks kind of green or brown. That's it. So it's not actually going to turn yellow until I add, so you can see it's kind of a brownish color. Until I add this, which is called alum, it's not going to turn the color that we want. So I'm going to throw another pot on here. Warm up a little bit of water. I'd rather have too little water than too much. And then this I've pre-measured out. That's probably going to be too much alum, but oops. That's okay. So it's still kind of making a paste there. I'm heating this up so that it's nice and warm. Hopefully getting that to mix in. That dissolved the alum. So some colors, if you boil them, it changes the way the color looks. Some colors, if you get them hot too fast, it'll change the way the color looks. So I'm hoping I didn't get this too hot too fast, because that'll make it look more brown than yellow. So you can see, looks a bit brown. But it should change when I add this other water to it. Ooh, that's nice and hot. That should change the color. I have no idea what this is going to do. Alright, so here I have my dye bath. It might look kind of like urine, but it also smells like urine, so there's that. So if nothing else, I've at least made some good artificial urine, which I know that's what everyone's looking for. So I'm going to take this, which is some calcium carbonate, another bag of white powder. This is going to be my actual pigment. This is going to be what makes it so that it's a solid. Because to make paint, I have to have a solid pigment. You can see it makes a little bit of a fizzing there. That's exactly what it should do. It's kind of like adding baking soda to vinegar. I mean, this basically is adding baking soda to vinegar. And I'm going to add a little bit more. So the more I add, the more pale my color is going to be. But I'm going to keep adding until I stop getting a reaction. Just stir that in. There we go. Now you can kind of see that yellow tint to it. That is exactly what I want, just to get a good yellow. Let's stir that. Ooh. I might end up getting more of a pale yellow than a bright yellow, which is what I would prefer. Ooh, oh boy. So what this will do is all of that calcium carbonate, it's reacting now, it will get the yellow dye on it, and it's going to settle to the bottom. And then once it settles, it's a very thick foam. This is so weird. It's like looks a lot like great stuff. The spray insulation. Eventually all that foam will go down. I need something longer to stir this with. So the pigment settles to the bottom, and then you still have the dye in the water. I've already removed this water and refilled it a few times. So I take a turkey baster and I suck up the water. I want to keep it as close to the surface as I can because I don't want to get any of the pigment. I just want to get the water. Alright, it's starting to stir the pigment up, which is what I don't want. So I'm going to stop there. And I will fill this back up with water. And stir it up. Alright, so there's not that much dye in there, so a lot of the color that you're seeing is from the pigment. You can see it's a pretty pale yellow. That's okay. And I'll keep doing that until the water that is at the top is clear. So I continued removing water and adding water and removing water until the water that I was removing was clear. So now I'm left with this. That's my pigment with clean water, suspended in clean water. So my next step is I have to get rid of all the water and just have the pigment. So to do that, I'm going to pour it through a clean filter. I'll let that drain through. All of the liquid will go down here, and I'll be left with just the pigment in the filter. All right, so this sludge here, that is my pigment. It's more yellow than it looks in the video. So I'm gonna pick this up, see if I can do this with one hand. It's still fairly liquidy, so I want to try to get as much of the water out as I can without losing any of the pigment. I'm going to set my phone down while I do this. So I'm going to squeeze it down. I don't want to squeeze it so hard that I make a hole in the filter. I want to keep the filter as intact as I can. You can see there's a lot of liquid still in there. I should probably wear gloves. I had an issue with the dye plant last week that I was allergic to. Alright. So then I'm going to open this up. Let's see what I've got. So here I have my paste. Still has quite a bit of water in it. Oh, my fingernails are dirty. I'm going to spread this out on here. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and take another clean filter, put it face down. I'll squish this out. And that's my pigment. So I'll let this dry, it'll shrink up a little bit. And then I'll scrape it off of here and grind it up into paint. And it's my yellow pigment. Alright, so let it dry. This is the dry pigment, weld pigment. You can see it's very, very pale. You don't see a lot of yellow there. That's okay. It should, when it dries, it loses a lot of its color, but when I add oil to it, that color should pop back. So I'm going to add linseed oil. Linseed is a yellowing oil. It's our most stable oil, and I'm not going to add very much. Boop, that's probably too much. Alright, so I'm going to mix this together. I can see it's already starting to turn yellow again. I'm not sure that this is going to give me the yellow that I want. This looks like it's come out more like a yellow ochre than it is a bright lemon yellow. So generally what that means is that either my dye bath got too hot, or well, I know I didn't use enough plant material. Somehow it got contaminated. It can also be if I didn't have enough acid in the soil that can change the color. So this is all stuff, this is why I'm testing and experimenting now. This is stuff to work out for when I do this in the future. So I'm going to crush this with my molar to get it back into more of a powder form. Looks like maybe I am going to need a little bit more oil. Just a bit. Just a bit more. Now it's all just starting to clump together. There we go. Now it's starting to look more like a paint, like it's supposed to. Get a lot of oil in it. But hey, there we go. That is an oil paint right there. When I have more pigment, I'll make it thicker. So I'm going to take some of this and put it on. We have a white board here. I'm going to take just a little bit, smear it on there, because I want to see what this color is that I made. All right. So now I can get this in the light. You can see I made a nice yellow. Looks a little green here, but it is yellow. Here, let me put something blue next to it so we can kind of... I'm pretty happy with that. I think that it's gonna work. All right.